Object destructuring works very similar to array destructuring. The destructuring syntax is on the left-hand side of the assignment operator, while the object is on the right-hand side. One of the main differences, however, is that with object destructuring, we use curly braces instead of square brackets. Also, the variable name must match the property name in the object that is being unpacked. Let's take a look at it. So here I have a very simple object, user1. We have 4 properties there. So let's go ahead and destructure the first name and last name. So I do declaration, and then here I have curly braces instead of the square brackets like I talked about. And then notice the variable names that I'm including inside of the destructuring syntax must match the property names up above in order for this to work. Okay, so that is the left-hand side. On the right-hand side is the object. So if we save that and just take a look really quick on the console, we should be able to get first name and last name, just like that. So we're able to destructure that object, immediately pull out some properties and assign them to the first name variable and the last name variable. Now, as we saw with destructuring arrays, the variables can be declared before they are assigned. In that case, we leave off the declaration keyword. However, there's one trick with this when doing object destructuring. I want to show you that trick because it can hang you up if you do object destructuring this way. So if I come down, I already have a variable declared ID, and I want to assign to that the ID property from the user1 object. Well, this is what I would think I need to do. All right, let's go ahead and save that and see what we get. As you can see, we get an error, unexpected token equal at line 14. This is where we're getting the problem, is right here. It doesn't like this equal. Well, why is that happening? Well, this is not a valid statement in JavaScript because the JavaScript engine, when it sees this curly brace, it thinks we are defining a block. Curly braces can be used to define blocks in JavaScript. So that's how it reads that initial curly brace. So in order to do this type of destructuring when we've declared a variable earlier, we need to put parentheses around it. And this will make it a valid statement by having those parentheses around it. So now if we save this, now we can come out and we should be able to just see what ID equals. Yes, and it has a 5. All right. So that's how we would do destructuring if the variable has already been declared. Now, as you can see from these few examples we've done so far, one of the downsides of object destructuring is that the variable name must match the property names up here. That is how the engine determines which value to unpack and assign. Well, we can assign a new variable name if we want to, and it would look something like this. Let me go ahead and do another line down here. Const, let's say, whoops, curly braces, not parentheses. Let's say I wanted to grab the isVerified property and I want to assign it to a variable named verified. Let's just do verified. I do a colon like that, and then here is where the actual variable name is. So this identifies the property, and then this is the variable name it will be assigned to. And once again, all of this is on the left-hand side of that destructuring syntax. So let me save that and let's see how this works. Now, if I come out and do isVerified, that doesn't show up. That doesn't give me anything. It's not defined because the variable we did was verified, and that shows the value in it. All right, and so that's how we'd give it a new variable name and not just what the property name is in the object. Now, with object destructuring, it will also assign an undefined value to a variable if that property doesn't exist, just like we saw with array destructuring. So if I do something here of a variable that is not available, there is no age variable inside of user1, What is that age variable going to contain? Well, it's going to contain an undefined because there's nothing to assign to it. So it is undefined. And as with the array destructuring, we can, if we want, assign a default value. 40. All right. I'm not telling you my real age. But now age will equal 40. Okay? So that's how we'd go about doing that. Very similar to array destructuring. Now, there are some unique applications of destructuring that you will sometimes see. For example, like when you pass an object into a function, a common thing you can do is destructure at the point the object's passed in, at where we declare the variables, the parameters of the function. And this is the type of thing I've seen many times in React applications. So here's what I want to do. I want to create just a simple function. I'm going to call it get full name, like this. Can you do a function expression here? And then what we're going to do is simply return the full name. And here's how I'm going to do it. Use a template string here. And I'm going to have two variables. These have not been set up yet, so I'll do that in a moment. But this is how I want to return the full name. We have f name space and then another variable l name. And so that is going to put these two variables together with a space in between. That's what this template string is going to do for us, and it will return that out of the function. All right. So let's say we wanted to pass this object into the function. How could we go ahead and destructure here where the parameters are defined, destructure the object so we can deal with the individual properties without having to write the extra code to do that for us? Well, here's how it is done. And I'm going to destructure and at the same time assign a new variable name. And these two variable names are the ones I'm going to assign. So I'm going to do two things in this. You could just use the same variable name as the property name, which we've seen before. But I'm going to assign it a new name right here, f name, okay? So curly braces, property name, what I'm assigning it to. Now let's do the next one. This will be last name. There's the property name, colon, l name. That's the new variable name. So now this function here is going to return a full name. So let's just take a look at that. I'm going to set up a variable here and call that function, and I'm going to pass in user1. So here's where we're passing in user1. It will destructure here, and then it will use the variables there and return a full name. So let's go ahead and look at the full name variable and see if we've got that. Sure enough, there is my full name. All right. Now, what about nested objects? You may have been thinking about this. Well, this is a pretty simple object up here, but there's nothing nested inside of that. What do we do with nested objects? And things can get a bit tricky if we need to destructure nested objects. So I want to add a nested object here. It's going to be an address, and that is an object. Then let's do three properties. We'll do a street, and then a number, and then finally a city. Whoops, colon. So here's our nested object, which is an address. Now, what would we do if we wanted to destructure the address information? We want to get street, number, and city. We wanted to pull those out and assign those to a variable and do it using destructuring. Well, here's how we do it. Once again, we use a declaration keyword for the variables, and then we use the curly braces. So that's our destructuring syntax right there. And notice that we point to address, but we don't want address. We want what's inside of address. So what we do here is we add a colon and then destructure again. The curly braces one more time. And then we can put the three properties and variables. So referencing the property names, these will become variables containing information. That's all the left side of it. On the right hand side of it, we put user1 like before. So if we save that, let's go ahead and take a look at street. Oops, do it one at a time. And number and city. And we've got all of those showing up. So that's how you would do a nested object. Now, when we were talking about array destructuring, we used the REST syntax. And let's take a look at what that would do with object destructuring. So I'm going to do another line here, and const, and here's our destructuring. And I'm going to grab ID, but I'm going to assign it a new variable name because I've already used the ID variable earlier. Same with first name. Whoops. I'll just assign that to F name. So we're grabbing the first two items there. And let's say we wanted the rest of that in an object. Well, with array destructuring, we can use the REST syntax to do that. It will combine the rest of everything else inside of this obj variable, which will have the rest of that object. That, of course, is the left-hand side. And here on the right-hand side, we put the object. So if I save that, we can look at, what did I do? I did user ID, right? We can look at user ID, and that came out right. Let's look at the obj now. So obj contains everything after those first two we pulled out. So we have the is verified, the last name. We also have the address, the nested object that was included there. All right, now a few more examples and we will be done. I want to add something here. I'm going to add an array of objects, very simple objects. And I want to show destructuring an array and an object together. How would we go about doing that? Well, you can probably figure this out on your own. It's pretty intuitive if you understand array destructuring and object destructuring. So if you'd like to try it on your own, go ahead and pause the video and try it. But here is how it would be done. Declaration, we're going to destructure the array first. And so I use array destructuring to begin with. Now, let's say I just wanted to grab out Brooklyn's information here. So I go ahead and skip two things, and then I want to grab the name property. And here's where I use the object destructuring. Curly braces, name, I could leave it at that, or I can rename this variable, which I've used, so I don't bump into something up here I may have used name for. I will rename that variable. That is all on the left-hand side, and then users, the array of objects, is on the right-hand side. So if we save that, U3 name should be Brooklyn, and it is, okay? So that is how you would destructure with arrays and objects. All right, one more thing I want to show you. For of loop is fantastic for working through iterables. An array is an iterable. It's easy to set up to get values out of because we declare a variable like this of whatever the iterable is. In this case, the array users. And I will be assigned each one of those as it goes through the loop, one at a time. So it's a great loop for working with iterables. But what if we wanted to destructure at the same time? Well, in place of this I here, we can put destructuring syntax. Now, we're going to get an object for each one of these. And let's say I wanted to grab the ID and the name. So I'm going to put in the curly braces and then ID, and I'm going to rename that to UID. And then also name, and I'm going to rename that to UName. Or I'm going to create the variable. It's not really renaming as it's creating the variable. That's really correct terminology for that. Okay. And so what do we want to do with this? I'm just going to log to the console so we can see those. Console log, both of them, UID and UName. So this would allow us to easily go through that array and pull out that information. And we could do something with it here in this loop. I'm just logging it to the console, but we could do more if we wanted to. And we come out here, we can see the user ID and the name showing up. Now, once again, Think about the number of keystrokes we have saved using destruction with these examples. Whole lot of typing that we have saved, and it just makes things cleaner when we don't have to do so much to just pull a value out of an array or out of an object. But perhaps more importantly, imagine how confusing the code might look if you didn't understand destructuring. So that's an important piece of this, is that you're understanding it. All right, let's move on.